Welcome to the Evergreen RX, your prescription for living well. Here, we're all about self-exploration, intentionality, and working with our mind, body, and soul for healing and growth. I'm your host, Hayden. I'm in my 20s and in search of connection, fulfillment, and ways to make sense of the world. If you're down, join me as I explore tools to bridge the gap between external reality and our deep inner worlds, discovering our own prescriptions for health, wholeness, and expansion. Hello, welcome back to the Evergreen RX. Today we're talking about decision fatigue. So off the bat, you might already connect with decision fatigue and what it means, even if you've never really heard of this term before. It kind of evokes an immediate response. We all have been in a situation where it feels like if I have to make one more decision or choice or plan, I'm just going to scream. I do not have the capacity for it. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, that feeling and some ways to combat it and some ways to hopefully reduce the amount of decisions you have to make, but also make the ones that you have to make easier. Drink every time I say make. So I'll start by laying out the groundwork a little bit on what decision fatigue is, kind of maybe some places that it sources from. Then we'll talk a little bit about the impact that it can have on your life. And then we'll talk about some ways to work with decision fatigue, and hopefully, we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive too into some of the places that this can stem from that we can really address so that we don't even feel as overwhelmed in decisions we have to make in general. Basically, decision fatigue is talking about the phenomenon of the more decisions that we have to make, the worse our ability at making those decisions gets. This can be, I think, seen on a macro level, but also on the micro scale. So that can be like within one day, towards the end of the day, you're making worse, quote unquote, decisions than you were at the beginning of the day. But this can also, I think, be a part of burnout or the feeling of just throughout your life over the course of weeks or months or years, you're feeling like your ability to make choices that are really grounded in your values and working you closer towards your goals is getting harder and harder. So how can we tell our decisions are getting worse, so to speak? So this can look like falling back on easy choices, maybe whatever our established pattern is, or whatever's like most readily accessible. So say, I really have a goal of practicing piano, which, that's a real goal for me. But I have my phone in my hand, and the easiest choice is just sit there and open up my phone and maybe respond to work emails or scroll or something like that. And the more tired I am of making choices and the less energy I have to motivate me to get up and to make a new decision, the less likely I am to do it, because we have wiring in our brain that just is so used to wiring in a certain pattern that when we're more fatigued, it's just so hard to choose that new neural pathway or that new wiring and make a decision that gets us closer to our goals. It can also look like decision paralysis, which is basically just like you get frozen in a moment where you're not even able to make a choice. Sometimes I've felt this at the end of a long day, talking about what to have for dinner. It's like, I can't even choose. I don't even know what sounds good to me anymore. And I don't want to have to make the decision. It can also lead to some reduced self-control. So like I was kind of saying with the first one, if we have goals or new habits we're trying to implement, when we are fatigued with those choices, self-control kind of flies out the window. And I think when we talk about this with decisions, like at least where my mind first goes is like to eating, eating habits and eating healthy. And that's true. That really does apply here. But I don't want to just point it to, your ability to self-control in terms of what foods you eat, because I think it's just so much larger than that. And also, in particular, eating habits have a lot of other things and beliefs and ingrained patterns that can also impact them. So in case your mind goes right there, or you start hearing some negative internal talk or chatter about how, oh, if I'm able to, be better about making decisions, and that means that I'll control myself better and I won't, eat the snacks that I don't want to eat. In case that starts happening and you start kind of berating yourself over that, like, here's my moment to pause and to just be gentle and kind of recenter that decision fatigue. While it can help you in those areas, and that's really awesome, it's not an invitation to go beat yourself up over it, because all of these processes are really complicated, and we're talking about making choices, but inherently in that conversation, we're also talking about our perceived ability to control ourselves and to achieve our goals, and that can come with like a lot of internal beliefs and baggage that I just want to, make sure that we're all reminding ourselves to be kind to ourselves. So, decision fatigue can happen at any moment, but usually stress or anxiety being heightened if we're not getting as good of sleep and we're more fatigued or exhausted, that can kind of up the level that, a decision can just feel overwhelming. So when you think about the amount of decisions that you have to make in a day, I mean, it's constant. It's a constant A or B or C or a multitude of choices moment, each thing that we do throughout our day. So starting from when we wake up, what to wear and what to eat for breakfast, maybe throughout your day, when to schedule your next meeting, or if you're taking an exam, choice A or B, that's throughout our day. And then at night, maybe after a long day of work, what to buy at the grocery store, what show to watch. And all of these carry, or a lot of these carry connections to what we value as well. And I do have an upcoming episode that will be about your values and really aligning them in your day-to-day. So if you want to hear that, just follow and stay tuned. But, even what we put on in the morning, sometimes that can be feel like a big decision, because it represents, what we look like to others as we move throughout our day. And, talking about food and eating, what we buy at the grocery store, there can be a whole slew of thoughts that flood our brain when just trying to decide what snack to buy at the grocery store. So these decisions, they range from really small and minute to larger ones, maybe like what trip to take, or, whether or not to change jobs. But even the small ones that look small on face value can feel big. And this is when we start really getting exhausted, because if every decision feels big and we're always trying to reorient ourselves to our compass, whatever we want to align with to make these choices, then it can get really tiring by the time it's like 10 a.m. and you've made a couple of choices for the day. I think that decision fatigue is such an interesting topic for kind of the age range that I feel like I'm talking to, 20s to 30s, and just this idea of coming into our adulthood. A big part of what I feel like is adulthood is just that we have increasingly more choices to make. And I think one of the things, jumping ahead a little bit into how I think we can combat it, is that idea of loving self-parenting, which is putting a little bit of borders or structure around the choices we make, creating, like a false sense almost of limited choices. That can be a really loving thing to do for ourselves, that, you can imagine a really good parent would do for a child growing up is, you're not asking your kid what they want for dinner. You might be asking them between two choices. Sometimes you're not asking at all. But, what to do on a Saturday, you might say, hey, you want to go to the library, or do you want to go to the park? And you help create these boundaries around it that kind of, again, take the whole world down into these digestible, bite-sized pieces. So what does it all matter? Like, why besides just the discomfort or exhaustion of having to make choices, on kind of the larger scale, how does this impact us? So, overall, decision fatigue and chronic decision fatigue can lead to more dissatisfaction with our choices. If we ruminate and procrastinate on choices, then usually, scientifically, scientists have shown, I don't know what study to quote you, but I'm telling you, I've read it, that that can lead to more dissatisfaction when we do end up making a choice. Sometimes it leads to forced choice by, you run out of time and somebody else makes the decision for you, or one of the decisions is off the table because you didn't make the choice in time. It can also lead to a sacrifice in our values. So again, just kind of wanting to avoid the choice or falling back on those default patterns can mean that we're sacrificing something that we really do value. We can also miss opportunities. That's kind of what I was saying with forced choice, is that, this avoidance behavior that kind of rises up when you don't want to do something, or when something just feels just even impossible to do with the energy and the capacity that you have at that moment. Sometimes that means that we miss opportunities that would have been really good for us, or something really interesting to explore. All right, so hopefully now you have a good sense of the impact and the way that decision fatigue shows up. I'm 99% sure all of you listening have connected at this point to this feeling in yourself. Maybe you're feeling it right now. Maybe even choosing to listen to this podcast over a different podcast was fraught with a little more energy or questioning than it normally would be. And it felt like a chore even to pick something to listen to for enjoyment. I have definitely been there. This topic is really interesting to me because it's something that I am also kind of currently working through and struggling with, and just figuring out ways to hopefully not feel so much weight with each decision. I mean, guys, when I tell you, if I go to a new restaurant, and I know a lot of us out there do this because I've seen it online, most of the time I will look up the menu ahead of time, and I also have a process of eliminating everything that I don't want, so then I can narrow it down to the things that I think I might want. And then basically from there, I just stress and go back and forth between the options. And I'll eventually order something. And if somebody ordered a different thing that I thought about, and it comes and I see it, then sometimes I have food envy that, oh my God, that looks better. I should have gotten that. And this is just one meal out of the thousands, millions, bajillions that we eat in our lifetime. Like, that's kind of a real good clue into this decision is becoming bigger than it needs to be. And why is that? Off the bat, I can think of I'm definitely trying to avoid some kind of anxiety by exerting way too much control over what it is that I'm eating. But also there's a level of self-trust and spontaneity that's not being allowed for in my decision-making process. It's really grasping for control in these areas that I don't really need to feel such a sense of control over, but I think that can point to something larger, which is this sense of why do I feel like I need to exert control here? Why do I need to feel like I can't, why do I feel like I can't make a mistake here, in terms of maybe I didn't get the number one choice of food? And, how else is that playing out in my life? Maybe what is sourcing this? Is there something in my life that I feel like I don't have control over and it's making me really uncomfortable? So I'm kind of letting it squeeze out in all of these other decisions. That could also look like changing my outfit 3 times in the morning to get to the just right or the perfect option instead of the one that feels good enough. So, I went straight from undergrad to grad school. And so, just in the last 6 months or so, I've started working full time. And since starting that, Saturdays have become really rough for me. And it's been so surprising. But Saturdays are the day of, it's all open. It's fair game. I can do what I want to do. I don't have homework. I don't have, other obligations. And I really want to be able to recharge and reset for the next week. And it's just become like this impossible thing where I even start thinking on Wednesday or Thursday about, okay, what am I going to do this weekend? I need to set out my plans for this weekend because I don't want to get there. I don't want to get to Saturday morning and have the day stretching ahead of me. And then I'm going to have to choose what to do. And I know I'm just going to get into, decision paralysis and not know what to choose and end up not doing what I want with that day. And part of that, I think, is that I'm afraid that I'm not going to maximize my time, which we could probably have a whole other podcast about that idea. But it's also that when I'm in those moments, I have so many interests. I have so many things I want to do, people I want to see, books I want to read, that not feeling like I can do all of those at once and that I have to really just dedicate my time to one thing has become really stressful. And, I don't know. I'm just postulating, thinking that the internet probably has a lot to do with this, is that, we constantly see all of the choices out there. Everything that people are possibly doing with their lives. But we have one life and we have one track that we can only ever be on. Right now I'm recording this podcast. I can't also be reading the book that I want to be reading. And I can't also be hanging out with my friend. I am choosing with this time in my life to just be recording this podcast. And that is a commitment. It is making me say no to other things in my life. And the more that we're able to see all of the things people are saying yes to in their life, I think the more stressful it gets when we're making our own decisions because we know that we're saying no to all of those other choices. And to me, that all it kind of boils down and becomes like this representative example when it comes to a Saturday of like, what am I deciding to do with my life? And time keeps ticking by and passing, and that means inherently that there's certain things that I can't do, and I have to come to terms with the fact that I can't do them. So, again, this is a really big topic, and if you want to hear more about that, then let me know, because I think I really could talk for a long time about it. But that plays into, I think, a part of the deeper psychological process on what's happening when we're paralyzed at dinner ordering an entree. Like, how have we gotten to that point? So part of it is like what I was saying, decision paralysis, or what people like to call analysis paralysis. Analysis paralysis is a cycle. So usually what happens is there's a new decision that comes up, and then we freeze because we don't know what choice to make, and it's another new decision. We analyze all of our choices. This can look like rumination or, over-analysis, pro-conning everything. And then we come to a decision, and then we feel uncertain about it, and maybe we have regret or we second guess ourselves, and the cycle all starts again. And that can happen with any decision from the smallest to the largest. So if you're resonating with that, sometimes it helps to kind of lay out the scope a little bit in the cycle, just so you know what's happening when it's happening. But I think that overthinking part is where a lot of us get stuck on. It's just the overthinking. Well, if I did this, then this could happen, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And I think there is some level of comfort, even if it feels uncomfortable. There's maybe an internal sense of comfort of, if we haven't made a decision yet, then that means that we haven't said no to anything, and everything is still possible. And we can still imagine all of the scenarios in which we've made a different decision. And this kind of leads me into my next point, which can be perfectionism. Perfectionism plays a really big part in analysis paralysis. So if you're a little bit like me, then maybe hearing perfectionism makes you blanch, kind of, because I think we have started to associate a certain personality type or behavior with what a perfectionist looks like, and maybe you don't identify with that, social image. But perfectionism comes in a lot of different forms, and I think it impacts all of us to a certain degree, and that can really play a part in making decisions. So how we can kind of combat that is by learning to connect with and go with our gut instinct. So if you need, a little bit of a primer on this, you can go back to my episode about intuition, because that feeling of going with our gut and the first thing we're drawn to, the more we're able to practice that, the more we reinforce it. And yeah, sometimes you might go with your gut and your food comes and somebody else's looks better, and maybe you even try it and you think it's better, but you'll learn that you can survive that and that it's okay. It's not the end of the world, because you'll get another opportunity to make a decision about what to eat, like probably max like 8 hours later, and so it kind of builds that resiliency in learning to trust the choices that we make, even if they don't seem like the perfect or most ideal one. That you learn there's nothing actually wrong with the choice that you made. It's okay. It's okay for something to just be good enough. So really getting connected with that sense and seeing if you can practice going with your gut instinct. And if it feels good to have some of that overthinking analysis be circumvented and just be able to make a quicker choice. You might find that while your choice might not feel like the perfect one, the amount of overthinking you were able to avoid by making a more quick decision is so worth it. You might just be less fatigued and exhausted by the end of the day. And that can be totally worth it over, feeling absolutely exhausted and maybe thinking that you were able to make a couple perfect choices in the day. So also kind of connecting back to what I was saying about creating more of a safe container for yourself, like a parent would, I think that can also look like creating time boundaries and routines. So maybe you know that you take a long time in the morning to pick out your outfit. Possibly you start picking it out the night before, so it's one less decision you have to make in the day. Maybe you also set a timer on your phone. You give yourself 5 minutes, and whatever happens at the end of that 5 minutes, that's what you're going to go with. Which, obviously that gets easier over time, and maybe that 5 minutes starts feeling like you have too much time to make that decision. But really starting off by creating these boundaries for yourself. And like I said, routines. You can also go back and listen to my first episode, which is all about routines, which, I made my first episode because it's so foundational to what our day-to-day life looks like. If you have a set routine when you first wake up, that is a handful of choices that you're not having to make. I get up, I make my bed first thing. I'm not thinking about when I have to make my bed. Oh, do I make it today? Do I have time or not? Then you go brush your teeth, then you go, and it becomes automatic over time and gets reinforced. And so it's just a ton of decisions that you don't have to make, which can save up your energy for later in the day when, maybe you do need to make a decision at work that's important and you really have to consider it from every angle. You have more reserves to be able to do that effectively. I think it can also be helpful to, when it comes to our social life, making kind of standing appointments or hangouts with friends. If you find yourself getting overwhelmed with trying to schedule with someone and deciding what time would work best, or what to do, having a standing hangout with someone can be a really great way to avoid that. Maybe you like to go to the farmer's market, and so you have a friend that you go with every week. It's at the same time, and that's when you see them. And then you also get to go to the farmer's market. It's something that you can rely on, and then you know when you're going to see that friend, and it can become something really fun instead of stress-inducing. That can also look like standing appointments with any doctor or practitioner that you see. If you go to therapy, having a regular weekly or bi-weekly time that you meet instead of, some therapists are fine with scheduling, as needed, or kind of switching it up depending on your schedule for that week. But that can just lead to more components being up in the air that you have to figure out on a regular basis, when you could just set a time, dedicate to it, and know that you can rely on it. It can also be helpful to get into the practice of evaluating the size of the choice. The way that you can evaluate the size is by looking at what the consequences could be. What is the worst consequence of choosing to do one activity with your Saturday morning versus the other? Maybe I'm going to read this book for 30 minutes instead of the other one. Okay, the worst consequence is that I lost 30 minutes that day of being able to read the other book. Like that's okay. I can live with that. I can also even change my mind if I start reading one book and I'm not into it. So really looking at what the impact could be. When you're buying a new car, there's some consequences. You're going to spend a lot of money on that car. So yeah, you might need to take a little more time to really analyze the options and to consider the pros and cons. However, even though that is a big decision, still I think setting a time limit for yourself could be good, because big decisions, or ones that we deem to be big or important, can really be prone to getting stuck in that analysis paralysis, because it feels like, oh my God, it's life or death. If I buy the wrong car and I drive it off the lot and it loses all its value, oh shit, I've just really messed that one up, which can create anxiety and it builds, and then, you end up never making a choice. So I still think in times where it's a big decision and you want to be really careful and evaluate things in a intentional way, that's great, but trying to put some time boundaries around those still, and understanding that most decisions, probably every decision to a degree, we can come back from, we can rebuild from, we can make different choices. It's okay to make a mistake. And that brings me to my next point, which I feel like I'm always bringing it back to this point, but I guess it's just in my blood, that the idea that we can survive things, that we can weather the consequences of our actions, even if they're not ideal, that can be rooted in a lot of childhood stuff or beliefs that have been instilled in us from a young age. Maybe there's past mistakes and consequences that felt really big, and now they have started to undermine your trust in your ability to make choices for yourself. That's super common. That's super understandable. But some ways that we can help with that, going to therapy is one way, having somebody to talk to and kind of identify and work through those things. But also, I think there's a piece of regulating the nervous system again. If you start feeling that anxiety rising up and it's feeling kind of disproportionate to the level of choice you have to make, taking a moment to sit with yourself, take some deep breaths, ground, maybe put your feet on the earth or do a meditation. Maybe you sit and take some time with your journal, and seeing if you can kind of regulate again before you dive into trying to make that choice. When we feel that disproportionate anxiety, that is usually a really good clue that something from the past is showing up and making it harder than it needs to be. And if that's happening a lot, then that might mean that you're in a heightened state. Your nervous system is in a heightened state of awareness because of your past experiences, and that's something that you need to process and release so that you can come into a more centered place to be able to alleviate some of that anxiety. You can also kind of recalibrate the importance and the impact of the decision. That's what I'm talking about with analyzing how big the decision really is what's the ultimate impact that it would have on your life. For me, one Saturday where I don't feel like I, fully maximized it and did everything I wanted, that's just one Saturday. That's just one day in my life. It will be okay. The impact is really not that large. And that kind of helps, me take a deep breath and think, okay, it's okay to just do what feels right in this moment and to let that be good enough. I keep coming back to that idea of getting comfortable with good enough. And there might be beliefs surrounding that I have to unpack first and process around, what I do with my time and what that means to me. But even having the awareness can start to alleviate some of that self-imposed pressure. Also, at the end of the day, there is an opportunity to just act. Like I was saying, nothing is that permanent. Most things can be undone or choices can be changed midway, and you can change your mind, and that's all right. So just acting, just scheduling with someone, saying, you know what? I want to see this friend. Yeah, let's do lunch Thursday. Let's put it on the calendar. And maybe it starts rolling around closer and you're not feeling it anymore and you have a headache or you had something come up. That's okay. You can change your mind. Hopefully that other person will be flexible with you and that you can be flexible with yourself to know that nothing is set in stone. And even if something rolls around and you thought it would be the right choice and you do it and it didn't actually feel that great, you can weather it. You can survive it. It will be okay. I promise. So here we are at my dose for you. So I would love if once this podcast ends and you continue moving throughout your day, if you maybe percolate on this question a little bit on what you're afraid will happen if you make the wrong choice. You know, you might be surprised at the answer. Maybe some part of you is like, I don't even know. I guess nothing bad would happen. Nothing, that serious. And it might start to quickly make your decisions a lot easier. But like I was saying, you might find some more stuff there. That there's some real fears on what it means to make a wrong choice. And you might want to have a place to process that or even take some time with yourself to really lovingly come in and talk to yourself about those fears and talk about, I understand you're afraid of that, but like, it's going to be okay. I got you. We're going to handle it. I'm an adult now, or I have these skills now. I have this support system now. We can handle it. So just percolating for a little bit on what you're afraid of, maybe of making a wrong choice. And then my challenge for you would be to do a micro experiment on experiencing what it is that you fear. Maybe next time you go out to eat, you just choose the first thing that sticks out to you on the menu. Or maybe you even go so far as to choose your second top pick. And you see what it's like to get your second pick, to eat it, and to see even if you can enjoy it. And that it can be a fine experience for you. And practicing, connecting with that gut alignment, connecting with that self-trust. And I also think it can be helpful, creating some of those routines for yourself to minimize the amount of decisions that you have to make in a day, to really save up your decision-making power and capacity for the ones that really are necessary or novel throughout your day. And seeing how that starts to maybe regenerate some of this ability and resiliency when it comes to the choices that we have to make. Yeah, I feel like that went, into some deeper realms than maybe you were expecting, just talking about decision fatigue, but it's the Evergreen RX. If it doesn't go there, then it's not this podcast. So if you like it, I'm so happy, and I'm so happy to have you here as a part of this community. You can go join on Instagram, message me, let's connect, and I'm also on TikTok, so you can check that out. But yeah, I hope this helped you. Again, any questions, email me, DM me. I'd be happy to talk, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.